Chapter 6. Wait till it's over. By the time Scott and Raymond made their lunches, stowed them in their packs, and wheeled their bikes out of the garage, it was almost 10 o'clock. Scott decided not to take any chances with Raymond and suggested they walk their bikes over to Rusty's. But Raymond threw his leg over his bike and rode up and down the driveway in circles around Scott. Scott's mouth fell open. "Where did you learn to ride like that?" "Mrs. Gordon taught me how to ride her old bicycle. I've been practicing since spring vacation." Raymond kept riding in circles and figure eights. The kid was full of surprises. "Do you think Tiger will bring his friends today?" Raymond asked as they wheeled out of the driveway and headed for Rusty's. "Tiger doesn't have any friends." "He must be lonely." Raymond sounded sympathetic. "Lonely?" Scott had never thought of Tiger being lonely. Nah, Tiger doesn't want friends. He goes around looking for fights. Kevin, Eric, and Rusty were standing in the front yard when they got to the O'Hara's. Scott and Raymond left their bikes by the gate and went inside. Raymond saw Joey and ran to talk to him. "Hey, Scott, come here," Kev called. "You've got to hear this." Kev was laughing so hard he could hardly get the words out. "What's so funny?" Scott asked. Eric and Rusty were laughing almost as hard as Kev. "I talked to Alan last night," said Rusty, between bursts of laughter. "He said his mom wouldn't have let him keep Oscar anyway. Not even for 5 minutes." "Why not? I thought the deal was all set. If this was some kind of joke." Scott didn't get it. Alan's dog got into the shed where he kept his zoo and scared the skunk. Rusty hooted with laughter. The dog got sprayed and ran into the house. Alan chased him all over the house before he got the dog out. Alan's mom was so mad she made him take all of his animals out into the woods and let them loose. Then he had to give his dog a bath in tomato juice. Kev collapsed on the ground, helpless with laughter. Rusty finally wiped his eyes and said, "Let's get going. I want to see if we can find any of these things Mr. Higgins told us about." Scott called to Raymond, and they started off. It was a perfect day for a ride, with the sun warm on their backs and just enough breeze to keep them cool. Off to the left, a low bank of clouds was building up, but it was far away. There wasn't much traffic, but Scott rode beside Raymond just in case he had any problems. They turned onto the road that led to Sandy Cove Harbor. Tall evergreens lined both sides of the winding road. They had ridden more than half a mile when they passed between two steep banks that had been cut through a hill to make the road level. Raymond was still pedaling along, keeping up, when Kev and Eric turned right onto an old dirt road. It wasn't much of a road, just two sandy tracks snaking off through a stand of young evergreens replanted on the logged off land. "How much farther is it to the old house?" Raymond asked. "Maybe another mile or two," said Rusty, riding behind Scott. The young trees gave way to thick woods. The tall old trees formed dappled bands of shade across the narrow, winding road. When they came to a crossroads, Kev and Eric stopped to rest. Raymond climbed off his bike to look around. One of the roads went straight off to the left. One curved away into the woods, and the other two came together in a V shape and spread out behind them like the spokes of a wheel. Raymond broke off a small branch from the maple tree and laid it in the middle of the road, pointing the broken end in the direction from which they had come. What are you doing that for? Eric asked, wiping his head on his arm. It was a lot hotter now than when they started out. I'm marking our trail so we can find our way back, Raymond said. Kev grinned. You don't have to do that. Look behind us. Raymond looked around. There, stretching away like tall ribbons, were their tire tracks in the soft, sandy soil. It will be a cinch to find our way back, said Eric. We've been here before. Come on. Rusty took the winding road that led deeper into the woods. Scott and Raymond rode close behind him. A short time later, Rusty signaled silently for others to stop. In the middle of the road, not 20 feet away, stood a doe, still as a statue. Her big ears cocked forward as she studied them with big, soft brown eyes. Then, with a flick of her tail, she stepped daintily into the woods and melted into the shadows. Did you see her? Did you see her? Raymond whispered, owl-eyed behind his glasses. Scott hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He let it out slowly. Yeah, we saw her. Raymond had to get off and examine her tracks before they rode on. It was almost 11:30 when they came to the road that led to the old house. A few minutes later, they came out of the woods. What was left of two split rail fences bordered both sides of the road. On one side were open fields where Scotch broom and alder saplings had taken root. On the other side, a shallow stream chuckled over rocks. At the far end of the lane stood an old weather-beaten house, half hidden in the trees. The glassless windows seemed to stare at them like two sad eyes. The gaping doorway reminded Scott of a mouth crying out in pain. It gave him a creepy feeling, in spite of the hot sun. What is it? Raymond asked in a low voice. That's it, Scott answered. They rode up to the house and parked their bikes in the weed-choked yard. I wonder if Tiger is here, Scott said as they trooped up the sagging porch steps and looked in the windows. Thick dust and dead brown leaves littered the floors of the empty rooms. No footprints, said Rusty. We got here first. Scott looked at his watch. It's almost noon. Tiger should be here any minute. They stood around on the porch waiting. The minutes ticked by. The air grew hot and muggy. No breeze stirred the drooping leaves. Maybe he's not coming, said Rusty. Let's go take a look at the junk and see what we can find. Eric put his hand on his stomach. I'm going to eat lunch first. I'm starving to death. He pulled off his cap and wiped his dripping forehead on his arm. There's a nice shady place over there by the stream. Let's eat over there. Good idea, said Kev. It will be a lot cooler by the water. But what if Tiger comes? Scott called, stepping to the edge of the porch. We can still watch the house and the road from there. Eric called back as he walked. Rusty and Kev and Raymond followed him. The cool shade did look inviting. Scott hurried after them. He picked a grassy place near the end of a small cedar plank bridge, studded with pads of bright green moss. From there he could see both the house and the road. Anybody want to trade? Eric asked as he spread out his lunch. To Scott's surprise, Raymond traded one of his chocolate chip cookies to Eric for a giant-sized oatmeal and raisin one. Then he traded his second cookie to Kev for half of a cheese sandwich. While they ate, Scott kept an eye on the road and the house. There was no sign of Tiger. Raymond devoured his lunch down to the last crumb, then picked up his wrappers, picked up his book, and crossed the bridge. Scott, come quick, he called suddenly. I found a bear track. It was too hot and muggy to move. Grumbling to himself, Scott got to his feet and ambled across the bridge to where Raymond was squatting on his heels at the edge of the stream. Eric and Rusty and Kev came too. You must be seeing things. Scott bent over to look. The paw print complete with foot pad, toe pads, and claw marks in the soft black mud looked like a bear track, all right. They were still bending over the track when the whole world suddenly lighted up in a bright flash. Eric and Rusty almost knocked each other over into the stream. Before anyone could figure out what was going on, a loud boom shook the ground under their feet. The sound ricocheted away through the surrounding hills. Thunder! Scott yelled, looking up at the sky. Dark clouds had swallowed the sun. It's gonna rain. They raced back across the bridge and snatched up their packs. The first big scattered drops pelted the dust around them as they reached the road. Then the sky seemed to open up, and the rain came. It was like standing under a waterfall. Head for the house, Scott yelled. We'll wait till it's over. Everybody ran.